I was going to make this week's episode about the Penguin himself, but honestly, is there even a point? Even if his days of battling Batman with exploding wind-up birds and high-tech umbrellas are largely behind him, Oswald Cobblepot is still one of the Cape Crusaders' most iconic enemies, and therefore odds are you're probably familiar with him to at least some extent. Plus, I don't really know any standout Penguin stories or particularly interesting character tidbits. Again, not a huge DC guy. But Agatha All Along's probably the more likely show to have week-over-week reveals. Case in point, I don't think it's technically confirmed who Joe, Locke, and Aubrey Plaza are playing, even though the internet on the whole seems reasonably confident they figured it out. So I can't start tying into that show yet. Oh, thank God! Sophia Falcone's in the Penguin show! That means I have a seminal Batman miniseries to tie this into! Anyways, before I really start worrying about the long wait to Halloween, let me get you up to speed on some of Gotham's criminal organizations. The Falcones are one of the most prominent and powerful crime families in Gotham. Or at least they were, prior to Batman's arrival and the ensuing rise of crazy costume criminals like Joker and Two-Face. But they're still definitely worth noting, especially because their patriarch, Carmine Falcone, was Batman's first significant foe in his post-crisis origin. That's after DC did their first major reboot and collapsed their entire multiverse into one Earth back in the 80s, for those who aren't familiar. Unprepared for the paradigm shift coming to Gotham, Falcone attempted to put hits out on both Batman and Catwoman, who scarred Carmine's face during a prior robbery attempt, but had no real luck against either character, and was ultimately killed by a coalition of costume villains, with his daughter Sophia taking over the family in his stead. There's also the Maronis, who are probably the second most notable of the more mundane criminal groups in Gotham, but mainly for their leader, Salvatore Maroni. Sal was maybe a tiny bit savvier about the potential for supercrime than Carmine Falcone, as he funded Hugo Strange's genetic experiments to create a bunch of monster men, although this backfired when he tried to collect, and ultimately he needed to be saved by Batman. Maroni is also responsible for Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face, at least in some versions of comic continuity, as he's the one who threw acid into Dent's face during a trial, resulting in scarring along half of it. I guess technically you could count the Penguin's organization, since typically the Cobblepots were a once-respected part of Gotham's elite, although Penguin's exploits usually don't involve family. I don't really think he has much family left, to be honest. And I guess the Sionis crime family might also count, since the original Black Mask, Roman Sionis, isn't exactly what you might call a powered individual. But I don't know, I think those two lean more towards costume crime to really count as mundane. Anyways, we know Sal Maroni, played by Clancy Brown, is going to be part of the Penguin show, and John Turturro's Carmine Falcone was a major player in 2022's The Batman, with his death and the subsequent power vacuum forming a prominent source of conflict. I don't know how many of Batman's more colorful rogues we can expect to see in the Penguin show, since Matt Reeves is clearly going for a more grounded approach, but if Harvey Dent happens to pop up, maybe keep a close eye on Maroni's pockets, huh? Next week, I don't really think it's going to be too important to the show, but what the hell? I'm going to talk about Batman The Long Halloween, and probably dive a little more into Sophia Falcone, too.